Friends, Romans, NOTCASTers. Welcome back to the NOTCAST. Number 401 today is, I think, the 8th of August, 2024. And I'm going to be talking about a record that came out a staggering 35 years ago, which is really odd because I remember it coming out. If you don't watch these too often, about twice a week, I'll talk about something that interests me. And judging by the viewing figures, not that many other people. And that's okay too. Because the implication, well, the old cliche is doing this keeps me out of trouble, which kind of implies that if I wasn't doing this, I would be trouble, which I don't think I am, because I have both a high cowardice quotient and a remarkable ability to be incredibly boring, as some of you who've seen some of the other episodes can absolutely confirm. But please don't. Today, instead, I am going to be talking about Britain's most overrated band. Yes, that's right. More overrated, in fact, than the Beatles band. And that band is one of Manchester's many exports. Not their best, not by a long way. In fact, not even the best band in Manchester in 1989. Of course, you can tell by the episode title and the t-shirt that I'm wearing that I am talking about the allegedly legendary Stone Roses, who are actually a really good band. I really like them. They're just not as good as everybody tells you that there are. And as John Lennon said about Jesus, often the worst thing about the Stone Roses are their fans. The people that claim that the Stone Roses invented oxygen, bread, and of course the synthesizer, which we all know is not strictly true. What the Stone Roses did do was they invented a certain kind of melding of indie rock, stadium anthems, and a very fluid groove-based funk, which when you put all those together sounds atrocious and brilliant at the same time, which of course is exactly the experience that people will have with the Stone Roses. So starting off, starts in what was released in October 1988 and recorded in January 1988 by Sir Peter of Hook, which I think was recorded at Strawberry 16 in Rochdale, where Joy Division recorded some of their stuff. This didn't sell very well at all, and of course I didn't hear it. What we find is sometimes with a band, you need to take people out of the lineup to actually subtract from the equation to free up the conversation that we've got between the remaining members. This was the first release that I think had the classic, or allegedly classic, John Squire, Ian Brown, Manny and Rennie line up with Pete Garner leaving the band, and I think Andy Cousins, who I think was on guitar, leaving as well. So this sold 2,000 copies or so in Manchester in 1988, and it is the first thing that you can hear when you hear the Stone Roses and you think of the Stone Roses. It's this type of sound that was birthed on this particular record that you think of, not Sally Cinnamon, but good as that is. And this is really a kind of like a song that I think is actually very underrated, primarily on the grounds that there's no real definitive mix of the track. So there is the 12-inch version, which has an extended intro and extra bass. We have a 7-inch version, which has extra wah-wah and extra overdubs on it. And in fact, if you want to get really cheeky, the B-side, 4 Fathom 5, was the first one of the Stone Roses' infamous backward tracks, and that is where you play the track backwards, and what you do have is you create an extra B-side which actually isn't very good, but you can tell it's the Stone Roses. Now maybe I'm thinking actually you should perhaps play loads of other tracks backwards to see what they sound like, and I might do that, but where you get the problem with backwards tracks especially is the drum sound, because the drum sound goes doof and then it fades away. Whereas what you don't have on the backwards tracks is the drum sound kind of fades in and then ends on a sudden hard noise. So which sounds really weird and really odd. But there is a secret third mix of Elephant Stone, which is actually 4 Fathom 5, which is the backward Elephant Stone, but then you reverse that, and that is the alternative 7-inch mix before the overdubs. That's the John Leckie mix of the track there, 4 Fathom 5, when you play it backwards. The 7-inch version and the 12-inch versions here are the Peter Hook mixes. So there you are, really. Although it says mixed by John Leckie, except for the hardest thing in the world, 4 Fathom 5 is an alternate 7-inch mix of Elephant Stone. So if you want to get really cheeky, you can play that backwards and get an extra secret Stone Roses track. Ooh, exciting. So, Elephant Stone. To me, it is a strange song because to me it's always felt like it's existed outside of the debut LP, although it is inserted on the American editions of the album. And it is also, I think, something which has been played live a lot, but was dropped quite early in the band's set lists, I think, probably about 1990. And then, and I've got some notes against here, is that the lyrics are particularly dense. This is the first one where you really think, this band are not just a band, they are a very good band. So the way that the lyrics work and the interplay that you've got against them is very underrated. You can never say that the lyrics are absolutely 100% the best thing about the Stone Roses, but what you can always say is actually their lyrics and the approach that they had to the songs always had an extra element that perhaps was often missed by people. So it had, and this is where it's going to get a little bit weird, is it seems to be kind of linking it a little bit, the song Elephant Stone. Where does that name come from? Well, it comes from the 1842 retreat by William George Keith Elphinstone in Afghanistan, apparently, which then draws an analogy between that and personal defeat in the form of heartbreak. At least that's what I think I read somewhere, and I'm not sure that's exactly true. And really, the whole of this is where the Stone Roses are birthed and born. And even the B-side, The Hardest Thing in the World, actually is a really good track. Really like that as well. You can hear that and go, okay, if that's a B-side, they're a very good band. But realistically, what we had when Elephant Stone came out, and of course Made of Stone and the debut album, is you had a band that had been in existence for 5 years, that had been writing songs in obscurity for 5 years. And so therefore had the opportunity to write lots and lots of songs. And if you wrote even 4 songs a year, which is only one every 3 months, which by the way is the kind of work rate where Prince would write an album in a night, you could end up with a position where you'd think that the band were actually much more prolific than they actually were. The Stone Roses were never a prolific band, never recorded huge amounts of material, never released huge amounts of material. And though quite why I've got a Strange Fruit recordings inner sleeve in here, I don't know, and I'm going to fix that next chance I get. This was the first release, I think, on Silvertone Records as well. And Silvertone Records were to become a millstone around the band's necks, even right up until today, with a terrible recording contract which they signed, which they hadn't even had checked by a lawyer, and had a reduced royalty rate for CDs, and extended the contract out to territories and formats not yet discovered or designed. So in theory, you know, if they discovered life on Mars or Saturn or wherever, they'd be selling Stone Roses CDs, and the Stone Roses would be getting a reduced royalty rate for them. So good work when vinyl came back and CDs sold F all, because what that meant was the Stone Roses were actually going to get some money. And I think they never really got paid for this. In fact, one of the reasons I think the Stone Roses collapsed and lost their momentum, which is leaping forward towards the end of the episode, is the arcane and incompetent legal deals that the band were subject to, which really ground them to a halt. The second single that we had, because remember Elephant Stone so bugger all, although it was reissued as a CD single later on in the early 1990s, and therefore charted considerably better, but the label Silvertone, when the band became famous, spent a lot of time just reissuing old stuff that had sold bugger all at the time. And that's perhaps not the best way to run a record label. The second single on Silvertone, the first single from the album, is Made of Stone. Again, what you can do when you look at the sleeve art that we've got for this, or Elephant Stone, or any of the other ones, you see a heavy Jackson Pollock influence on the design, the abstract. Kind of like when you have those pictures and you kind of look at it and you go, I can't see what it is, and suddenly your brain kind of focuses on a spot beyond what the image is, and you go, it's a schooner, if you've seen Mallrats, of course, with Ethan Suplee. But if you haven't, I just made a dated cultural reference to a 30-year-old sex comedy that you've never heard of. And with Made of Stone, for example, again, you had the 12-inch CD, which is here, and the 7-inch single. And the 7-inch single on the back features a close-up of a different bit of art. They've got all this art, of course, by John Squire, the band's guitar player, who later focused into visual art as time went on and moved away from playing guitar. that gave the band a very distinctive visual style. And so Made of Stone is a 3 or 4 track, depending on your point of view. Actually, no, it's a 3-track CD single as well. So Made of Stone itself is reached, I think, number 11 in the indie charts. It was released on the 6th of March 1989. It charted in 1989, the reissue in 1990. 1996, for some reason, it was a very what's the word I'm thinking of here? It's a damn fine track, actually, but it's a strange song. It's back to 2 tracks, Going Down and Guernica. Guernica is again another reverse track. So Guernica is Made of Stone but played backwards. The lyrics were removed, and they've taken the phonetic sound of the vocals from the backwards version and then turned them into new words and then sung what the backwards interpret. Okay, it's getting complicated. If you remember Twin Peaks, with the little dwarf guy who's a mad Trump fellow now and possibly dead, and he goes, okay, that's what they did, is that they actually got the backwards vocals, turned those into forward vocals, then Ian Brown re-sung them. So it's an extra vocal track on Guernica, which you wouldn't necessarily know, by the way. But what it was, and the whole kind of phased guitar sound that you've got on that and Made of Stone, is it's heavily influenced by machinery, which of course you might go, no, well, there's a lyric about 10 twisted grills staring back at me. The idea of the faceplate of a vehicle. You think about John Carpenter's Christine, the film from 1983. And they've almost built a face into the grills of Christine. That's where the idea comes from, is the idea of every car has a face. It's got those aero grills at the front, and it looks like that with the 2 lights on either side. It looks like it's a face staring back at you. So it's a song about, amongst many, many other things, driving fast with the wind in your hair, possibly flying over a cliff top, not dressed like Spider-Man, but also with that sense of gay abandon, like the end of Thelma and Louise when the car sorry if I'm spoiling a film that's very old for you now. It is. Thelma and Louise is, what, 34 years old now, 33 years old. So if you haven't seen it, that's on you. But the end of Thelma and Louise, that sense of wild abandon as you drive recklessly into the future. But it's also inspired by the sound of jet planes taking off. If you've ever stood at the end of a runway, for example, and you've kind of just heard that sound of as a plane goes over your head, especially, by the way, the Vulcans, which no longer are airworthy, XH558, one of my favourite planes in the universe. The sound that it makes as it takes off, it sounds like you're suddenly kind of arguing with a dinosaur, and that's the noise that jets make, that kind of huge, enormous power, like the opening shot of Star Wars. That's what inspired the Made of Stone track itself. And yeah, it's classic. I've seen it played live, very, very good, really works, really enjoyed it. Wish it had been more popular, but what it did do is it set the template alongside Elephant Stone, and of course She Bangs the Drums is this kind of Indian sound, but not in songwriting approach. You could imagine Made of Stone or She Bangs the Drums sung by, I dread to say it, some terrible rock band. She Bangs the Drums could have been, and it sounded like it could have been an AC/DC song, actually. You know, that big chunky riff, the lyric. You could imagine Brian Johnson in a flat cap yelling about, have you seen or have you heard the way she plays? There are no words to explain the way I feel. Except, of course, if Brian Johnson was doing it, there'd be more lyrics about possibly knees, legs, thighs, and, you know, shooting your gun or something. I'm not sure. Talking of shooting your gun, of course, the lyrics are to something like Going Down, the B-side, once mocked by Jim Bob from Carter USM as going, what am I thinking about? Come going down to the shops, which is not an inaccurate statement about the lyrics, as there comes to a point where the lyrics are so ambiguous as they become almost meaningless, and that is where sometimes I think maybe why the Stone Roses are a band that I like, but they're not a band I absolutely bloody love to the end of the universe. There is a theory that when people bring their own conceptions and ideas to a song, it then becomes a song that belongs to the audience and not to the band, which is really interesting, because there's always three kind of artistic layers to any lyric, which is the one that's meant by the person that's writing it, the one that's heard by the audience, and the one that exists in the future. So a song like The One I Love by REM, a song which describes the one I love as a simple prop to occupy my time, stunningly cruel lyric, but massively misinterpreted by pretty much everyone on the planet apart from snobs and NME readers. And so therefore you kind of go, the lyric to Made of Stone doesn't mean what it means. It means whatever the audience assigns to it in terms of a meaning. And then all of a sudden you look at something like Starship Troopers, which was massively misunderstood as a film, or perhaps something like Fight Club. Again, films where the audience clearly did not get what was being interpreted or what was being portrayed by the art. They put their own meaning and layer onto it. So Made of Stone, now that's 15 minutes of me talking about Elephant Stone and Made of Stone. Made of Stone's a banger. Just listen to it and you can hear this enormous, fantastic sound that sounds like an engine revving up to full speed. And the drumming by Rennie is absolutely precise. So what it does is it occupies a new space in music, because you have these four musicians. Let's not say that Ian Brown was a fantastic vocalist, because he wasn't. You had a very fluid, very talented guitar player who was able to switch between rhythm and lead, but also had a very interesting approach to sound. Wrote songs that were designed to be sung on football terraces, but sounded like they'd been made by the Comsat Angels. And Manny, who was a very funky bass player, who brought this second lead into it. Now, I think good bass players are very, very underrated, and I might do an episode about my favourite bass players. But there are bass players that go ding dong dong ding dong dong ding dong ding ding dong 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 dong, like Les Claypool and stuff. And then you have people that actually play second lead lines that duet with the guitar. And you think about great bass players that do that. I think Andy Rourke, for example, Matt Osman, who's very underrated as a bass player, Manny. They're all bass players that play in and around and fill the space between the spaces where the guitarist puts the rhythm and the melody and the chorus, and that kind of that hummability, because hummability is really, really important in making a song successful. The idea that if you've got a song and libraries gave us power and then work came and freed us free, but you can sing that while doing the washing up. And it sounds like, here's a modern nursery rhyme, or as a verb said, urban hymn. And then if you can do that, then you've got half of the melody anyway, because people can sing it. And people love singing songs around the house when nobody else is around. I mean, I say people, really, I'm talking about me, nobody else. And that's where Made of Stone became one of the great songs. Definitely, I remember hearing it in indie discos before it became a hit, and going, this sounds like it should be a hit. The way that suddenly towards the end, this guitar solo comes in, but it's phased at the same time through gentle use of the wah-wah pedal, whilst the drums suddenly play this duet that bounces against the guitar sounds, and you kind of go, wow, that's really something. And what it does, it doesn't necessarily try to do it, but it's capturing the euphoria of rave culture, but doing it inside a guitar framework, which of course is what happens when you get to I Am the Resurrection, the last track on the debut album. There's a sense of, it's almost like you're listening to a guitar band covering a rave track, and acquitting themselves absolutely perfectly. So I have to put Made of Stone down, and here comes the big enchilada, isn't it? The Stone Roses, the debut LP, released on the 6th of March, 1989. And as I said, it charted in 1989, it charted in 1990, and then again in 1996 on the back of the split, and then 2009 for a 20th anniversary reissue, 2017 when the band were yet again reformed and playing stadiums, and finally in 2022. So it's been in the charts 6 times, and its highest individual chart placing, I think, it was ever number 11. This is a very good debut album. Not amazing. A lot of people say it's one of the best albums ever made. It isn't, because it isn't called Technique by New Order, and it isn't called The Holy Bible by the Manic Street Preachers at all. But it is a very, very good debut album. But as I said before, if you've made only 2 singles in 5 years, you've got 5 years of writing songs that you can put together, and then you end up with the 11 songs that are on here, one of which is 30 seconds long and one of which is a backwards version of another track. So really you've only got 9 songs on your debut, and it took them 5 years to follow this up with an album that's regarded, to put it diplomatically, by many people as a disappointment. Not by me. I love The Second Coming. Yes, I am a contrary bastard. But this is a fine debut album. Now, what I'm going to show you is quite a rare version of this record. This is a 1989 Australasian release that I bought from HMV in Leicester in a shopping centre for £3.99 in 1991. And the reason that I bought for £3.99 is because the Stone Roses moment had passed in 1991. They were absent entirely that year. So people were starting to focus on other bands that were big in 1991. So I bought this copy after Nevermind by the Nirvanas came out. And the reason it was £3.99 is because it had been imported from Australia at something like £10. And what makes this version different to any other version is that it is in fact a gatefold sleeve, which features obviously a detail from the painting here, which became a t-shirt. Except this is obviously a mirror image there, and then it had some photographs on the inside of the band performing live at various places and recording for a Manchester TV show called The Other Side of Midnight. So you can see a repeat of this picture here and another photo from the same appearance, which is up there, and then here and so on, and that makes the band look like they're perhaps more interesting or dynamic than they actually are. You don't get an inner sleeve, or at least you didn't on my version. So maybe that was what was on the inner sleeve. You see a standard, relatively thin vinyl disc, because vinyl was expensive following the 1970s. They started doing very, very thin vinyl in the 70s when they had the oil crisis, which was caused by OPEC, the international oil trading cartels, and you ended up with vinyl. This is probably 90 grams or so, whereas your standard release these days would be 140 or 180. So it's quite thin vinyl. You used to be able to wibble wobble it. I'm not going to do it to this because I've seen how much a gatefold copy of this record is worth on Discogs, and I don't want to lose it by showing you frisbee versions of the Stone Roses. I think that would be impolite. But this is the, regarded by many people as one of the best albums ever made. Not by me, a very, very good, very competent debut, but not one of the best albums ever made. And it has on it, as I said before, the 9 songs plus Elizabeth, My Dear, and Don't Stop. So we go through the songs, order by order, and I think the first thing that I have to point out about it, recorded at Battery Studios between June 1988 and February 1989. It sold 4 million copies in the UK, of which 5 are in this house. So that's quite a lot of copies in this house, but each version is different, by the way. I'll show you the versions that I've got. I've got the original 1989 CD edition here from the UK. I have, hang on a second, this is where I should have planned this a little bit better. I have the 1999 anniversary edition there in a box set with a silly hat on the front. I have the 2009 version with the demos and a DVD. I also have, and this is bizarre, the debut as a double disc set, which is a promo for the full box set version, which features release highlights, including demos, unreleased tracks and stuff like that. So B-sides and remixes and things on there. Again, don't know why I got it, but you know me, I'm record collector scum. That's what I'll do. I'll buy box sets of things or releases I already own, and I don't even know why, but I've got to have it. I can't afford it, but it's definitely me, as was it Duncan X from Sheep on Drugs says, who's now a tattooist, by the way, in case you've wondered what's happened to Sheep on Drugs. Well, the answer is you've probably walked past somebody who's been tattooed by him, so there you go. And that is the Stone Roses debut, which again comes in a multitude of formats. As I said, released in March 1989 and recorded up to February 1989. And in those days, you could finish a record and it would be pressed out and in the shops less than a month later, which is pretty amazing considering the vinyl lead times that you've got at the moment. The way that it was described at the time was as the band were well rehearsed and they had no pressure but to make it good, no ticking clock over them, and it's pretty surprising that they would do this in 8 months, whereas it took them 4 years to make the second coming. Something went wrong there, which I think I'll pick up in another episode. It's really the template of Britpop. This is the album that, like the Velvet Underground, it may not have sold a huge amount to start off with, but everybody who heard it formed a band, including me. It's a template of Britpop. It's the styles and the songwriting of stadium anthems, but it's also got the sound, that kind of twee, slightly underplayed sound that you would get from the Kinks or someone like that, a kind of quite clean, not necessarily, offensive or biting sound. And live Stone Roses was a very different beast to studio Stone Roses, of course. The lyrics were perhaps, I think, softer, less misogynistic than the parts of the Happy Mondays. So you'd never have a lyric from the Stone Roses that would go, "Son, I'm 30. I only went with your mother because she's dirty and I don't have a decent bone in me at all." So you'd have less stereotyping, you'd have less observational lyrics. They'd be more abstract. They'd be more talking about ideas and concepts. And it's difficult sometimes to put the lyrics together and go, what is, what is, a song for my sugar spun sister? What does that mean? And it doesn't necessarily have to mean anything, but the fact that they're able to articulate it and say that's what it is something in itself, isn't it? So we have the classic lineup of the album, which means I'm going to have to leap forward in chronology. Is that a word? Chronology to the first track, which was also released as a single in America, "I Wanna Be Adored." This is the 1991 Silvertone Records 12-inch of "I Want to Be Adored," which got to good old number 35-ish in the charts. 12-inch just has the album version of "I Want to Be Adored" on, and it's backed with an unreleased demo called "Where Angels Play" that the band played live but never actually had a finished mix of it in 1989 that was scraped off the cutting room floor, and a live version of "Sally Cinnamon" from the Hacienda. Some versions of this I think came with an art sheet, some versions didn't, but "I Want to Be Adored" is, I think, just a great, silly, classic parody of a rock song. The idea of people getting on stage and saying, "I want to be loved, I want to be appreciated," kind of like almost like parodying or perhaps predicting what would come in a lot of gangster rap, that kind of "I'm amazing" and all that. But then the lyric, "I don't have to sell my soul, it's already in me." The concept of "I am naturally talented and brilliant, I don't need to make a deal with the devil, I already have it," whatever it is, that magic X factor. And sometimes that happens. And if you've been in a relationship and someone's walked into a room and suddenly you're like, "Oh my God, who is this person?" And suddenly all the atoms in the room change. And you see somebody and suddenly there's the moment before they entered the room and you had no idea what was going to happen, and suddenly you're drawn to this person. That's probably part of what "I Want to Be Adored" is about, that natural star quality which some people do have and carry in them. And you don't even know they have it, they just bring it and it's just who they are. And they just walk into a room and suddenly everything changes. And sometimes they kind of know it, sometimes they kind of don't. Or sometimes they only have that effect upon one woman or one man. And I've seen, in my life, probably 2 times, 3 times, someone's walked into a room and I've suddenly gone, "Oh my God, that person." But "I Want to Be Adored" is kind of like saying, I don't need to do anything, that's just who I am. And of course, built on that circular, repetitive riff, that wonderful, very simplistic thing, and then that break towards the end of the track. Absolutely great track, of course, as you know. Opened almost every Stone Roses gig ever since it was released. Certainly both of the ones that I saw. And then the second track is the third single from the Silvertone era, second single released from the album. It is "She Bangs the Drums," number 36 in the UK charts in July 1989. This is where I came into the Stone Roses story. The remix had extra guitars, it had extra backing vocals that were redone and thickened out, I think some guitar overdubs, and it had a slightly different rhythm track, so drums were edited and remixed a little bit. And it's just a fantastic song. It really is. I saw the pretty awful slow motion video that clearly was done very, very cheaply, because Silvertone were nothing if not tight when it came to money. And I was like, this band are really, really good, but I was limited on what I could buy by what I could afford to commit to. If I liked a band, I was like, right, well, I can't like everything that they do. I'll buy it when it's cheap, and then I'll see if I like it. Obviously, these days, you can look it up on Spotify, and you can go find this new amazing band, and suddenly 5 hours later, you've listened to the entire of their back catalogue twice. The Stone Roses, it was, I have to wait until I can afford it. I have a set amount of money every week. I can't buy all the records that I want. A record that I bought was an investment. I've spent £3.99 second hand from Second City Sounds or Highway 61 in Birmingham. I'm going to need to listen to this album several times to get my money's worth out of it, because effectively I was paying 50p per time to listen to the record. And if I didn't listen to it at least 8 times, I wasn't getting my money's worth, because that £3.99 was half of my budget when I was 14 years old. And that's perhaps why I've overcompensated now by buying far too many records. She Bangs the Drums, the second single, coming out in July 1989. Here is the CD single that's got 3 B-sides, which I'm leaping around in the chronology, but I think you'll understand why, which are Standing Here, Mersey Paradise, and Simone. Simone is a backwards track, by the way, and it's very good, but it's not, it's not all that. It's quite mellow, I think it's fair to say. Whereas Standing Here and Mersey Paradise, clearly songs that didn't make the LP, that could have been just as good on the LP itself. Standing Here is this huge, enormous, kind of multi-part epic that sounds a bit like Jimi Hendrix and Jane's Addiction at the same time. And Mersey Paradise is just this classic indie jingle jangle, the type of stuff that Northside would have tried to build a whole career out, and the Stone Roses put it out on a B-side, because that's how good they were. Third track from the album is one of the later singles, Waterfall, which is also paired with Don't Stop. So when played live, Waterfall and Don't Stop became one song together, whereas Don't Stop is effectively Waterfall backwards but with resung vocals, and you could put the two together, and the way the two are played live together, as they were in both 1989, 1990 and 2013, you can't really tell the difference between the two. This is the Silvertone 1990 12-inch, which is backed with a remix by Paul Oakenfold. Well, actually, Adrian Sherwood did the remix of One Love, which was rejected and not used in 1990. And Paul Oakenfold and Steve Osborne, the producers of Happy Mondays, Pills, Thrills and Bellyaches, by the way, Bandwagon Jumpers, did a 12-inch remix of Waterfall, which is on this 12-inch. These are quite expensive now. I think I Am the Resurrection is a staggering amount of money if you want to buy the 12-inch. I didn't buy the 12-inch, of course, because if I did, I would have sold it by now. And then we have Don't Stop as track 4. And again, the thing with Waterfall is it doesn't sound like indie. It absolutely, it's got that sound, but it hasn't got that songwriting. It sounds like it could have been written by any classic band in the 60s, except it's like a great unheard classic. I mean, you could listen to Waterfall and go, you could imagine that on the Beatles' White Album, for example. You could imagine She Bangs the Drums being an amazing song and a terrible album by Whitesnake. You could imagine I Want to Be Adored, for example, played for about 2 minutes by the Ramones. All of these are classic songs that come right at you, and they don't even have to try it, they just are. It's a great trick, actually. But what it does do is the songs have diminished with the passing of time and the amount of hype that's been built up next to them, where everybody thinks, they're amazing. Listen and go, it's quite good, isn't it? But it's not amazing. Whereas, of course, and this sounds showing off, but it's only by virtue of the fact that I'm old, is that I was a fan of the band in 1990. So to me, I don't have that sense of discovering this amazing historical band and being able to relive it. This is something that happened to me and I was aware of at the time, and I was dancing to I Am the Resurrection as the last track in Snob's nightclub at 1:52 a.m, for example. That's how it was. And you just knew that was going to be the end of the night, and then you had to wrap up. And if you were quick and fast, you could get to the bus stop in time to get the 2 o'clock bus, or you could catch the 2 o'clock bus as it stopped outside of Snobs on the way back home. £1.50, well spent. Track 5, side 1, Bye Bye Bad Man. Don't really know what that's about, actually, but I think Elizabeth, My Dear, is pretty clearly a song about the Queen. I'll not rest until she's lost her throne. My vision is clear. It's curtains for you, Elizabeth, my dear. And obviously, as somebody who's not a royalist, I thoroughly support that sentiment. We then have Song for My Sugar Spun Sister, which again, I don't really know what the lyrics are about for that track. We have Made of Stone, which I've talked about previously, and then we have the triple whammy at the end, which is one is Shoot You Down, which is probably the least of the songs on the album. When you think about songs on an album, classically, the middle of side 2 is where the album tends to tail off a little bit. And then you also have This Is the One, which apparently is played at football matches, but also works very well as a prelude into the amazing I Am the Resurrection, the last track on the album. And I Am the Resurrection, in my opinion, is the best Roses track, because what it does is it sounds like an indie band or a rock band covering a rave track you've never heard before. There's this huge extended ending. It's the riff from Taxman by the Beatles band played backwards. We've got Rennie doing the shuffling drum sound, which the band worked up through sound checks, and then you have this huge rave exit. So this triple ending of a crescendo of sounds. Now you could imagine that covered by a rave band with lasers, or maybe used as a set closer by somebody like Metallica with all those frantic tempo shifts. And you kind of go, and then the lyric about "I am the resurrection and I am the light," and all of that about how you self-belief will allow you to become your own savior, and you kind of just sit there and go, "Well, that's really quite something." It was released by Silvertown yet again in their releasing singles to plug an album because the band had gone on strike. Here's the CD single, which features the astonishingly bad stoned out club mix and pan and scan radio version, both of which replaced one of the best drummers in the world with a goddamn drum machine, which is terrible. It really is a very, very, very bad idea, even worse than some of the other bad ideas. In fact, the Stone Roses career is a story of bad ideas and mismanagement, if I'm honest about it. For example, even in the very early days, the band's manager, whose name wasn't really, I think, Gareth Evans, told someone that the band didn't know how many T-shirts he'd sold, and he kept the money. I mean, for goddamn sake, when you've got a band that are that good, do not fuck with the talent. He could have had a really great, good run with them for the rest of his life, but he decided to screw them over at an early stage and then screwed the pooch and lost the prize. Well, that's your loss, mate. But even down to the classical mismanagement of things like Spike Island, which I'll get to in a minute. Very clearly, the Stone Roses were on a crest of a wave at this point. They had gone on to do things which people hadn't expected. They'd suddenly broken over. They'd gone from being a band that was big in Manchester to a band that was big in the world, and really showed. Now I'm going to again leap forward in the chronology a little bit. I have, what's this? Well, this is just the B-sides LP from the 2009 multi-disc set. So yes, I have Mersey Paradise, Standing Here, Simone, Guernica, etc. all on this disc, which means I don't actually need the She Bangs the Drums 12-inch, which is quite good because I was thinking about buying that earlier until I remembered I've got all the tracks on here anyway. So with that and the debut album, the band started off. They played the Preston Guildhall, but they didn't play the Preston Guildhall's main hall. They played the reception area. They played Walsall's Junction 10, for example, which is about 400 people. They played smaller venues, and they built it through a word of mouth and a reputation. And suddenly people started to hear about them. And they're going, this band, this amazing band, the Stone Roses I've heard of, what's going on with them? And they filmed a show, the only officially released live Stone Roses show, which, to be honest, is a bloody shame given how good everything else that they've done in their live shows could be, which was released on VHS and also on this DVD in 2004, The Stone Roses, live at Blackpool Tower Ballroom on the 12th of August 1989. The same day, the Happy Mondays played the Manchester Free Trade Hall, by the way. And the idea was that you have a seaside day trip away, and the band played a show which was filmed, multiple cameras, shot on film, finally released in 1991 or 1992. I remember the adverts at the time said, the only way you can guarantee to see the Stone Roses this year is to buy this DVD, and it blew VHS, and it's a 57-minute live show that's thoroughly underwhelming, truth be told. The band are quite good, but they're not amazing, and one of the reasons that they're not amazing is because the sound check was late. There were no radios backstage. They had 7,500 tickets, but they only sold enough to get halfway back. They decided that they were either going to shoot 3 songs for the She Bangs the Drums video, or they were going to spend £70,000 and film the full show. So they filmed the full show, and it was all very last minute and very come together. So the only reason you can see the Stone Roses live in 1989 at Blackpool is because somebody at the very last minute pulled their finger out the arse and made the decision to actually film it. Which again, if you're in a band of that size, you've got to take your chances where you get them. You shouldn't be fucking about, truth be told, with bizarre and unusual ideas around cash flow and so on. And we'll get to the Spike Island abomination later on. There's very little recorded activity of the Stone Roses in their classic live iteration that's been heard or circulated in anything even vaguely approaching decent quality. Tours were not really a thing. One-off shows were the thing that they did. You know, in 1990, I think they played, was it Copenhagen, Helsinki, Belfast, Glasgow, Spike Island, 6 shows. And yeah, maybe a festival in Roskilde, and you kind of think, actually, where other bands really went for it and hit for it in tours, they didn't. So 1990, for example, and one of the reasons I think that Happy Mondays had a longer commercial tail is that when their opportunity came up, they hit the road, they played live, they flaunted their wares, they showed you who they were and you believed them, which didn't always happen. You know, if a band didn't tour, for example, I think they had an arena tour planned in 1991 that didn't happen. They had some American shows planned in the summer of 1990, which again didn't happen. And you think, actually, the only time the Stone Roses really toured America was once in May 1995. And you kind of go, for a band that wanted to be big and rule the world, you could have done a lot more. You know, a lot more. Although I'm getting into where it all went wrong, of course, which is perhaps a little later in the tale. Because at the same time that they played Blackpool, they had also just finished recording in studios in Sawmills and in Battery in late 1989 to come out with what was going to be the first of the non-album, post-album singles, Fool's Gold. Yeah, you've heard this one. It's a classic, isn't it, really? It's got this wonderful rhythm, which Rennie uses a 13-bar loop from Hot Pants by Bobby Bird, and Manny borrows the bass line from a remix of Know How by the Young MC. The lyrics are inspired by The Treasure of Sierra Madre from 1948. And whilst there's an early mix of this on a Heineken sampler, which I do have, this 9-minute 53 version is really an exercise in not even songwriting, it's more groove. Actually, you can really hear where sometimes, and this is something which Kraftwerk have done as well, which actually rhythm is really, really important. If you just listen to the rhythm track, just the bass and drums from Fool's Gold, and you go, that's a hit. That is absolutely a hit. It's not a great song. Fool's Gold isn't a great song, but it is an absolute bona fide classic hit that you can dance to. It came out in a number of formats. I did have the What the World is Waiting For 7-inch, but I sold it. And it was then flipped over to be Fool's Gold 415 after about a week. Because originally it was a double A side with What the World is Waiting For. And What the World is Waiting For is pretty good, but Fool's Gold is the one that it became. So this is like a double A side, vacuum molded, no stickers because it sold an awful lot. Went to, I think, number 9 in the UK charts. Got onto Top of the Pops the same week as the Happy Mondays. In November 1989, got a CD single. Here is one of those. Thankfully, not made by those shysters PDO, which has the 953 mix of Fool's Gold, What's the World is Waiting For, and the edit of Fool's Gold as well. But the real gold here, and this is something which again I picked up dirt cheap on import. This is the RCA 1990 American 12-inch of Fool's Gold on gold vinyl. Oh boy. Now this makes me feel like some asshole that I knew that lived in Middlesbrough who said, look at the label, sniff the vinyl. But it's really nice, it's really good looking. In fact, I can put this over there and I could just bathe in gold actually, but let's not cook the record. But lovely gold vinyl there. I looked at it recently, it's quite expensive. I was quite surprised actually. I was like, this was £3.49. When I bought it, and I don't even remember when I bought it, but it's a classic and it's a banger live. I managed to see them play it live at Finsbury Park. In fact, I never understood, because the Stone Roses, I think, did some amazing improvised versions of Fool's Gold at some of the shows in 1989 and 1990, and when they tried in 1995 they just couldn't nail it. It just wasn't happening. You know, it was very conventional, and I think I'll talk about that later on, because the then drummer was playing to the record and not playing to the song, if that makes sense. And there's nothing wrong with playing to the record, but the record was really just a template or a demo compared to what the finished record and the finished live experience actually was. The band followed that up with following on from Fool's Gold by playing, I think, one whole show in the UK at Alexandra Palace in 1989, which was filmed by Granada Television. Reportedly, the sound was terrible at Alexandra Palace, which bears and follows my experiences of every show I've ever been to at Alexandra Palace, which is the sound is generally terrible. At least the indoor area, the outdoor park where I saw Suede and the Manics recently, really good. But Alexandra Palace was plagued with bad sound, and it was filmed by Granada, but I think 3 songs have kind of circulated in tiny bits, but it's disappeared. All these classic shows that exist, and they're locked somewhere away, or perhaps they don't even exist at all. So the band went into hiding. Silvertone re-released Made of Stone. They re-released Elephant Stone. In Japan, we managed to get this EP, the What the World is Waiting For mini album, a 6-track CD featuring What the World is Waiting For, Fool's Gold, the 12-inch mix of She Bangs the Drums, the 12-inch mix of Elephant Stone, and Guernica in Going Down. This was imported in great numbers, very expensive to buy for a period of time. I bought it in a charity shop for £1.50 and broke the cardinal rule of having the band photo on the front. But look at that artwork, isn't that gorgeous? Really lovely artwork alongside, you know, lyrics to the tracks, photos of the band members. Really nice design, actually. If you're going to do a record store day vinyl EP, guys, this is probably the thing to do, I would have thought. And of course, what I haven't talked about, and what I do and should mention, is that the cover art that we've got throughout this period with lemons on. Little known fact, and hang on, I need to pull out the vinyl LP. There is that this is heavily influenced by the French student riots of 1968, and the idea that came from the French student riots was that they had lemons which they put over their faces, which both negated the effects of things like tear gas, but also helped them detect when it was being aimed at them. The red, white, and blue there of the French flag is not a coincidence, and it ties in with the idea of the overthrowing of the unjust. The other thing which is also kind of suggested here is, and apparently this is intentional, is it's like a representation of the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, which is on the cover of this album by the Led Zeppelin. And which is meant to signify a causeway that leads to another universe in ancient mythology. The idea that somehow we can reach and ascend to a better plane of life if we overthrow capitalism, comrades. Not sure, that might be a bit of a leap. It might be a bullshit answer for an interview from a band member at some point. But I like the concept of it, and the idea of the lemon, seemingly innocuous but kind of revolutionary before everything was turned into a fucking meme. Right. And relax. The next step after Fool's Gold was One Love, the final single released in the Silvertone era by the band. Its release was delayed because what you can see right down there is a slice of the original cover art, which in the days when racists were afraid to be racist, i.e. a very long time ago, when you pulled out the postcard which had the original... Oh, where's it gone? I had a postcard in here with the sleeve on, but I don't know where it's gone there. But in the original sleeve, which you can kind of see on the back, you can look at it from a certain angle and see it as maybe almost like a combination of something that resembles swastikas, which is not a good idea. In my opinion at all. I wonder where that postcard's gone. Oh well. It's got 2 tracks in it, One Love and Something's Burning, both of which played live in the studio, both long and extended, and following on from Fool's Gold kind of indicate the direction of the second Stone Roses album, which we never really got, which was a heavily groove-based, riff-based, kind of long extended workout, light on melodies, heavy on groove and wah-wah guitar. The band don't like One Love, and although it was recorded with a new set of equipment, a custom Fender J guitar by John Squire, and that brought a new sound to the band, I think Ian Brown said the chorus wasn't strong enough. We tried to cover all bases and ended up covering none. And that's why One Love hasn't been played live since 1990. But it is actually a really good, underrated song It's quite a fun little excursion. It's not, it feels a little insincere. You know, sometimes you listen to a band and you think, you're trying to sound like what you used to do that made people like you. There's a slight element of that in One Love. But you flip that over, put the B-side on, Something's Burning, All Is Forgiven. Something's Burning is amazing. This kind of otherworldly, almost subterranean, understated groove that just kind of rolls along, coves into view, and then just kind of disappears on the way out. Of course, nobody knew when One Love came out that would be the last release by the Stone Roses, the last new music we would hear until December 1993. And people didn't really believe that was going to be the case. For the next 4.5 years, the band released nothing. Nothing officially, of course, but their label had other plans. They brought their live existence, as was at that point, to a close with a show at Spike Island. Here is a bootleg t-shirt. No, that's a bootleg CD, actually, which takes it. The cover I have taken from the t-shirt design, which is an audience recording, and the audience recording of the show is the only thing that we can hear at the moment. The show was officially recorded, albeit in a very slapdash kind of 2-track fashion for the band's archive, and the show was meant to be filmed on 8 cameras to be broadcast to cinemas in the United States to show America what they were missing out on. The filming was abandoned about 2 days before because somebody somewhere decided they couldn't afford £100,000 to film the Stone Roses at Spike Island, which, given that it is now regarded as a seminal and euphoric moment, the peak of that era, 1990, for that particular movement, just seems ridiculously tight-fisted to have done that. They could have made history and people could be going back and watching it now, and it would have enhanced the band's reputation. But somebody somewhere didn't want to put £100,000 down to immortalise that event forever. In fact, it was so shambolically run that, as I understand it, the bar was emptied. The bar takings from the Hacienda were driven up the motorway in the middle of the night to pay the contractors that hadn't been contracted, and the money was handed over in cash bags at about 3 a.m. at a service station somewhere in between Manchester and Blackpool. I mean, ridiculous, amateurish nonsense. Obviously, if I'd known that was happening, I would have sacked the guy straight away, but I didn't. But even as a 17-year-old, I just sat there and go, really? That's not how to manage a band. That's how to run a band if you're filming it for Spinal Tap, for God's sake. The Stone Roses had been approached by other labels, Geffen, for example. Lots of people were interested in signing them for the inevitable huge future that was due to come. But Silvertone wanted their pound of flesh. They released more singles. I Want to Be Adored, as mentioned before, again back to the previously unreleased demo version of Where Angels Play. Although the band were playing a medley of Fool's Gold and Where Angels Play at Spike Island, which is magnificent, by the way. And they did release Waterfall, this time backed with the remixes by Steve Osborne, Paul Oakenfold and Adrian Sherwood there in 12-inch and 7-inch form. And of course, I Am the Resurrection with the astonishingly bad remixes. Not content with having released all of those, of course, the band then followed it up, or more correctly, the label followed it up with the less than wonderful Turns Into Stone. Turns Into Stone, as is shown here, is a CD and LP compilation of the non-album tracks from the period. Elephant Stone, Hardest Thing in the World, Going Down, Mersey Paradise, Standing Here, Where Angels Play, Fool's Gold, What the World Is Waiting For, One Love, and Something's Burning. Hangs together very, very well as an album. Takes you on a journey from one version of the band to another. At the same point, shouldn't exist. It's kind of like, The Sound of McCommons and Butler. It's a compilation album that has become a very good album in its own right, but it shouldn't be, but it has, and it exists on those terms, but it's utterly unnecessary if you've got everything else. To plug the release of Turns Into Stone, Silvertone raped the vaults ever further with a reissue of Fool's Gold, this time featuring the rejected Guy Called Gerald remixes, the top 1 and bottom 1 mixes of the track, which are probably okay for 1989, pretty dated these days, and were never amazing. It just had this sense of contractual exploitation around the release of Fool's Gold. I didn't like it at all. And then the band went very, very quiet for a number of years. They didn't do anything, not publicly. They retreated and wrote out of the public eye. So what we've got here is a sense of missed opportunities. Alexandra Palace wasn't filmed. Spike Island wasn't filmed. The label decided to argue with the band and not renegotiate to keep them. The manager ran it in a shambolic fashion and basically defrauded the band on occasions. And of course, even though you had the CD, which had the lower rate of royalties, the album was put technically reissued multiple times. In 1999, I think we got the 10th anniversary version, this time featuring a photograph of Rennie's hat on the front and a bonus CD of Fool's Gold, What the World is Waiting For, Elephant Stone and Where Angels Play inside a hardback book there. Not very good. Just basic, just, you know, rip-off, reissued nonsense of something that had happened previously. I paid about £1.99 for this a few years ago in a charity shop. Yes, I go and buy records from charity shops because they're cheaper and more affordable. The album itself was reissued, this time remastered with the band's input in 2009. And this was the first time that you had actually a reissue that matched what the record deserved. It had the album in there. I think it's had the 11-track version of the album, a decent book for photographs, text that tells you how amazing they were, text that doesn't tell you how ridiculously mismanaged they were, a second disc called The Lost Demos, and this is demo versions of most of the tracks on the albums, some of the B-sides, and a track called Pearl Bastard as well, which isn't amazing, truth be told, alongside an alternate recording of an abandoned take of Something's Burning. And just to count things out, you get DVD 1, but not DVD 2 of the Stone Roses DVD, featuring the Stone Roses live in Blackpool. Still to this date, the only extant fully released officially or legally Stone Roses show. As I said before, the reissue did come in an enormous version. It came in a 7LP version with, you know, B-sides, demos, USB sticks, backward tracks, probably your own lemon and everything. I remember seeing a guy at a train station once who had it, and he'd clearly been very, very pleased and very proud of himself. I was going, that's like £100. That's a rip-off. And that was like 15 years ago. Dread to think how much it would be now. Yeah, there you have it. If there's one lesson to take away from the Stone Roses debut album, it is that never underestimate how many different versions an out-of-control record company can put together to rip you and your fans off, because this is one of the most reissued, repackaged, reformatted, exploitative back catalogues, which actually come from a very, very slender area of work. You know, 3-4 singles, maybe 8, 9 B-sides and 11 songs on the album, and one released through a loophole live VHS. And yet somehow the Stone Roses industry, as led by this label, has been able to exploit it fully many times. They're probably now on their 14th different colour of vinyl, by the way, as well, because if you can't release new music, you can release new colours of music, although I don't listen to music with my eyes. Now, wrapping up, what I will say is, despite what it sounds like me being bitchy and harsh about this, the Stone Roses debut album is in my opinion, it's really very, very good indeed. I really enjoy it. There's lots of good things about it. It should have been the start of a brilliant career and not the end of one, which, thanks to record company and managerial machinations and bullshit, is what happened. They killed the golden goose trying to get it to lay too many eggs and thought they could rip off these idiotic artists, and in the end they just drove it away, and the magic never really came back, at least not for a long time indeed. So the Stone Roses, yeah, difficult discography, difficult band, really like the records, but there's a lot of warning signs in there around how not to treat your artists. Treat them with respect and let them work their magic, and don't try and rip them off. Okay, not that anyone will listen to me, but there you have it. Right, NOTCAST 401. And it's going to go quiet for a couple of days because I'm off seeing some bands, some places, with some people. And I will see you when I get back sometime next week. In the meantime, of course, stay beautiful, beautiful ones. And as Mog the Cat says, just like Jerry Springer, take care of yourselves and each other. Okay, bye. You still here? Movie's over. Go home.